وانت محلك وانت معنا قناه الاس دي واي.
You are recorded.
What?
You are.
I am? Please don't give it to the FBI.
Put you on YouTube.
I don't want that.
Did they say bad thing? So why are they threatening you?
It's me, man. I'm not such a
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Inshallah, in the next few minutes, I will be talking about a few points related to the Hijrah, some lessons and results of the Hijrah. And I will not get into the actual actions, the details, and I'm sure the other speakers will be covering some of those details. I will try to draw some conclusions from the actions and the events that took place during Hijrah and after Hijrah, inshallah. The first thing, we know that the Prophet ﷺ, when he arrived to Medina, what was his first action? The first action was to define a place for the masjid, right? So that's basically his first action. When that place was designed or was actually found by Allah's guidance, the owner of that land offered that land free to the Prophet ﷺ, but the Prophet refused. And he insisted on paying for the cost of that land. So this, the first action, it gives us also some sense of fairness and justice that the Prophet ﷺ tried to establish from day one. Once he started to build the masjid, he built it with his Sahaba, of course, with everybody else, and he himself helped putting the blocks and the building himself with his own, hands. And this is immediately established to the community that the equality among all Muslims, that he did not act like a chief or a leader or somebody who's above everybody else. He was just a worker like everybody else. So he gives us the second principle in building the masjid itself. The third aspect of building the masjid was the masjid as a building itself was a very simple building. Was built with simple walls, and the roof were tree branches, and even the mihrab and all that were very, very simple. They were nothing fancy at all about it, which gives us the idea of austerity that the Prophet ﷺ tried to establish from the beginning. That is, the building is not by its design and its decoration. The building is just a place to house what goes on inside that building, which is a whole lot more important than the actual building itself. This is the third lesson that we learned from the Prophet ﷺ. The fourth lesson, he built the masjid big enough to house the whole community. It used to all come for jama'ah prayers, for all kind of gatherings and meetings. So that gave immediately the sense of inclusiveness to the community. So the community was very inclusive from day one, and the masjid was the gathering place for all the community to come in and gather together. And ironically, the Prophet ﷺ, as you know, his house was attached to the masjid itself. And his wives lived, in the different rooms just attached to the masjid. And immediately, we will see what the idea here of Tawheed, that everything is together, is one. And that's how we see that the private life of the Prophet ﷺ and his public life are connected. They're one. They're not two different lives. It's not like what you see politicians tell you, this is my private life, I can do whatever I want. Private and public are separate. The Prophet ﷺ gave us the example that's not the case at all. His private life, his public life were all together in one aspect, in one property. So after the masjid was built, the masjid itself took many functions that created the basics for that new society that the Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims were creating. That's a huge movement that's gonna grow and grow and grow and becomes huge and humongous throughout history, as we know it, even up to today. But the masjid itself, as a building, what did it serve? It served, number one, as a prayer hall, right, as a place to worship. So what does worship mean in Islam and in those days? It means the faith, the iman, the aqidah, the vision. The vision of society. That's what faith is about. It's not about acts of worships that have no meanings. They are acts of worships that all connect together to project a vision for the whole society. That this society is based on that vision, based on those values that are projected by those acts of worship. So this is the first function, is a place of worship. The second function of the masjid was it's a political gathering place. The Sahaba, may Allah reward them, they used to gather all the time. The Prophet ﷺ used to gather all the Sahaba. They used to have shura, discussions, consultations among themselves about all kind of politics, all kind of issues related to the community, to the ummah. That consultation, that shura, all took place in the masjid. So the masjid was a political gathering place to truly reflect, like the parliament, democracy, whatever you want to call it, but that's what they used to do, is shura. We know this is a principle of Islam that came early on, and that was not known at that time. I mean, put yourself in that kind of time and location, how governments, how cities, and empires, and all of that. There was no such thing as consultation, as shura, as people sitting in one place and making decisions collectively. The third function of the masjid was as a place of learning, because we know all the education took place in the masjid. So it was like a school that taught people, all ages, all kind of things, not just about religion, but about life, because we know religion and life are one, and that's part of the tawheed. That's why the Prophet's house was attached to the masjid. It's not you say, well, this is religion here and this is life there. There's no separation. Religion came to guide life, to give us a vision so we can go on with our lives on this earth and then in the day after, inshallah. So it was a place of education, the masjid was. And finally, the masjid was a place of distributing zakah. They used to distribute zakah and charity and all kind of distributing wealth among the community, all in the masjid itself and outside the masjid. They used to put things all over the place. And so it served as a place for social welfare and social justice. So the masjid was a place of worship, was a political gathering place, was a place of education, like a school, and it was a place to demonstrate social welfare and justice. So based on that masjid that created the first stone to this new community, we see that a new type of community was getting born. A community that had not been known before to the Arabs or anybody in that region. A community that was based on factors and elements that are totally different than what people knew at that time. In Quraysh, in Mecca, in other cities, or in Arabia, at the time, there used to be tribalism. There used to be tribes, and each tribe with its own values, its own system, and their own position and status in the society. Here, all of a sudden, all that tribalism was eliminated in the terms of a society of an ummah. It created a new community or a new ummah based on brotherhood. When the Ansar and Muhajirin became brothers to each other, what did they do? They gave half of all their wealth to their brothers and sisters who were migrating. They gave half of everything. Look at Muslims today. Look at Muslims who are being, kicked out of their homes, people who are suffering, who are subjected to all kind of injustice. How are the other Muslims treating them? Are they treating them like what the Prophet ﷺ showed us? Did the Ansar help the Muhajirin, or did they kick them out and and call them all kind of names? But this is the ummah that the Prophet ﷺ created. based on brotherhood. And the brotherhood was extreme and clear. Half goes to the Muhajir and half stays with the Ansar. The second principle, it was the principle of forgiveness. The Aus and Khazraj, the two tribes before the Prophet ﷺ, they used to fight all the time, used to be enemies, used to hate each other. And then the Prophet ﷺ, all of a sudden, he made them forgive each other. That forgiveness is not that easy. I mean, think about it yourselves now. If you have any kind of enemy or another country that attacked your country or your homeland and really created all kind of injustice to you, how do you feel about those people or that other country? That's how the Aus and Khazraj used to feel about each other. But once the Prophet ﷺ brought them into this new ummah, this new community, forgiveness took precedence over everything. They forgave each other, they forgot the past, they started a new page. That same lesson was taught to us later on by the Prophet ﷺ when he went back to Mecca with Quraysh. The same thing. After all what Quraysh did to him, all those years of humiliations and torture and all of that, what did he say at the end? You go, you're free. The prime example of forgiveness. This was the base of this new ummah, the new community that Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba were establishing in Medina with the Hijrah. The last item that is also unique is about the faith itself and Iman itself. Faith at that time used to be a way of belief. I mean, like sets of beliefs, you believe this and that, and that's it. But had nothing to do with your life. Like when now we see separation of state and church. The same concept. You go to the church on Sunday, the rest of the week has nothing to do with Sunday. And you separate them completely. And that's basically how faith was believed at that time. Now when this new ummah came along, it created a whole different concept. It created a society based on faith, and the faith is the values and those principles that will guide society regardless of what society believes or does not believe as a religion. And not only that, but it was reflected by actions. It's not just a set of beliefs, it's a set of actions. Whether it's from praying together as a group, or to giving zakat, to share the wealth among the community, or enjoying the good and forbidding the evil. All of those aspects are part of society, how the faith and society have become one. And one of the unique documents that many of us, I mean, I didn't know about it myself till recently, it's really something all of us should research and look at it carefully. There's a document called the Constitution of Medina. The Constitution of Medina is a document, it's authentic, we can find it, and it talks about what are the rules and regulations of this new ummah, this new community that the Prophet ﷺ set in Medina when he moved to Medina. And let me read to you some of those articles in that Constitution of Medina. The first, liberty and freedom. The Jewish tribes, for instance, had all their internal affairs. They had freedom to do anything they want to do internally. All their internal affairs were left to them to decide. They were left to worship any way they want. Their freedom of religion was granted. The freedom of their own social affairs was granted. Their own even court system was granted. Everything internally was given to the Jewish tribes who were in Medina at that time. The second thing was accountability. The only responsibility for all those tribes and the Muslims and the Munafiqeen and everybody else was that they have responsibility to defend the homeland. They have an agreement that they're going to defend Medina. And all the problems with the Jewish tribes later on resulted from their default on that agreement of defending Medina. Had nothing to do with their religion or their internal affairs. It's all by breaking that agreement of defending Medina. And that's something really important for us to understand, because a lot of non-Muslims are attacking us, attacking the Sahaba at that time. They're saying, oh, look what they did to the Jewish tribes. And if you look historically in details, all what happened, they're all political conflicts, really amount to a treason, form of treason, because they have defaulted on their agreement to protect Medina as they signed on when they first established this new Medina community. And then the issue of justice and equality. The Prophet ﷺ created some kind of a court system that it wasn't even known at all to the Arabs at that point. It's something that we currently call arbitration. It didn't exist before. They used to, if somebody has a problem, they go to the tribe. If, the two tribes have problems with each other, they fight each other, they have revenge, this and that. All of that was eliminated, and any Muslim who had any issue will go through the court system, and it's a form of arbitration that the Prophet ﷺ designed. And the same for the non-Muslims who were in the community. They had their own systems, and the Prophet ﷺ gave them that freedom to have their own systems. And we also realized that that all the people had the freedom of thought and intellect and belief. The Prophet ﷺ knew the hypocrites one by one. He knew all those hypocrites. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the names to him. But he did never punish any of those hypocrites, even though they were their worst enemies working against him. Why? Because on the appearance, on the outside, they acted like they were Muslims. So he treated them based on the appearance, not based on their true intention that he, as a Prophet ﷺ, knew, but the other people did not know because it was not obvious. So that's how society works, by giving justice and equality to people. They give them rights and responsibilities and duties, and they're all responsible equally in front of the law. And also finally is the issue of social welfare. Because now with the Medina society, the government was responsible for the weak in the society. Who are the weak? The poor, the refugees, people who came from outside, were asked for refuge. They granted that refuge, in the Medina. So the society created a system of social welfare that was not known at that time. And if we look at the new political system of Islam at the time of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina after Hijrah, three major principles come very clearly. Number one, freedoms and liberty. Number two, equality. Number three, fraternity and brotherhood. What does any of you know what those three words mean? What do they mean here in the West? Liberty, equality, fraternity. Those are the principles of the French Revolution 1,000 years later. And those are considered to be the basis for all human rights, and all what you see in the West now as the free West is all based on the French Revolution. Those are the three principles of the French Revolution. Look at the Prophet ﷺ, at the society of Medina 1,000 years earlier and what they produced. And now we consider everything, all the human rights, everything is based on the French Revolution 1,000 years later. So what are the lessons that we learn from all of this? We learn that the perseverance pays at the end, inshallah, with Allah's help. But perseverance, we see the Prophet ﷺ, as was mentioned before, started with one in the cave. There were few dozens in Mecca, few hundreds initially in Medina, 100,000 in year 10 Hijri when the Prophet ﷺ passed, and then currently 1.3 billion people. This is started with one, and now 1.3 billion. That's all perseverance. We also know that Allah's victory does not come cheap and does not come without a lot of cost and price. We see that the Muslims in Mecca, they suffered, they were humiliated, they undergone so much distress, as the brother Michael mentioned earlier. I mean, we cannot really imagine. Now we feel, people don't like us here and they do this and that. This is nothing compared with the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, early Sahaba, suffered in Mecca. So all of that they endured, all that humiliation, they endured all that hardship until they were able to be granted victory by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How was the victory granted? The first victory was to move to Medina. To all of a sudden, from being a small minority that is being oppressed, to now a new society, or a beginning of a new society, that they are the major players in that society, and they created a society that flourished throughout. If you think about now a situation when they tell you a new person came out somewhere in the middle of some country that is totally out of this, the power, so to speak, and in 50 years that movement dominated the world. Do you think that person is crazy? It's not impossible. But that's exactly what happened at the time of Prophet ﷺ. The migration itself was a huge sacrifice. It's not easy for somebody to uproot their roots and move somewhere else. You sacrifice your family, your wealth, your environment, your childhood environment, everything that you learned to love when you were young, you sacrifice all that to migrate. That's what the Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ did by migrating to Medina. And all of those sacrifices, all that endurance with keeping in front of them the vision of the new society. The vision that is the aqidah that we acquired in Islam, that tells us not only how to live our lives, but how to view this life, how to view it in light of the Day of Judgment, our accountability, our responsibility, why Allah created us on this earth, what is our goal in life. So in summary, we see that that this exemplary community was based on vision, which is the aqidah, was based on a new form of governance, at the time was unknown, which is based on shura, justice, equal rights and responsibilities, was based on human rights. A lot of the things I mentioned earlier, if you open any book today on human rights, you see all those ideas that the Prophet ﷺ and the early Medina society was doing. I mean, there's nothing new for us. Unfortunately, we just strayed away from it, and we just talk, but we don't do any actions. But the reality is, the human rights, especially we're talking about 1400 years ago, societies were completely different. If you're not even allowed to think or believe in anything like that the king or whoever the ruler is allowing you to think. That's, and then social welfare. Social welfare is a major thing that happened. It didn't exist at all. Used to be you have the poor and the rich and and the strong and the weak, but there's no interaction among those classes. Now all of a sudden the new community Ummah in Medina brought all that together and provided that from a governance standpoint. So as I mentioned before, the Hijrah was the seed that grew and created this huge tree that we still see it today. That has inspired and continues to inspire the souls and minds of millions and millions of people. And there's no other empire, ideology, movement, or anything on earth that has ever done that or will ever do that again. This is a one-time event, and that event started with the Hijrah. That's why this Hijrah is not just two people moving from one city to another. It's a huge movement that started with that very beginning seed of it. May Allah reward you and forgive me for any mistakes I made.
Jazakallah khair. Barakallah fik. It's a good presentation, and I think it make us think and make us, question a lot of things that we have here. Break time is coming, so we started late, so I'm going to punish you guys by staying late. Inshallah, after Salat Isha. I mean, we have 5 minutes. I don't think it will give us much of the Sheikh Nuruddin. So what we do, inshallah, we'll take a break. There's some drink, coffee and sweet. And then we'll continue, inshallah, after Isha. We will have Sheikh Muhammad Hilali, Sheikh Nuruddin, and we will have the open session. I have 5 minutes. I don't think I can do much with it, except if somebody have a question. Then we will have just a break and then we'll continue, inshallah, after Isha.